The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Meemaw and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew. Chief Librarian Thomas Senna. And featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Thank you so much, Doug Donats. It is great to be here in the SNL Hall of Fame. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair where each episode we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. Except for this week, because this is our very special Don Pardo Award show where the three of us, Thomas, Matt, and myself, put our heads together and award the Don Pardo Award to a deserving individual, or in the case of this year's award, deserving individuals. I won't bury the lead any longer, but before I go anywhere, please, wipe your feet. This week, we are going to be talking about a major component of Saturday Night Live, and that is the SNL band. So the way we're going to tackle this is we're going to go in chronological order to the best of our ability. We might miss a couple of years, but we can fill in the blanks as necessary for you to get your little history lesson. But this has been enough of me talking right now. How are you doing, Thomas?
Hey, JD. Doing really well. It's nice to be on a little an actual episode with you and Matt, like the three of us kind of uniting here as one united front. This is really fun. We were talking as we're recording this, we're coming off a really fantastic Kristen Wiig episode. So I think all of us are kind of energized by SNL right now. So we're taking that energy from the recent Kristen Wiig episode and putting it forth here for this episode.
Oh, that's today. Fantastic. Matt, you're not in your usual corner this week.
No, I've moved my desk around. I need to make room to watch that 1970s French disco funk and dance around.
I wonder if they were even. I know when they counted the numbers, they were speaking French, but I wonder how much of the rest of it was actual French. Or
should have asked my wife. My wife was asleep on the couch, or I would have asked her. She's a French teacher. I wanted to wake her up and say, "You got to watch this sketch," but she was gone. So. I'll ask her. I'll show it to her today and ask.
It sounded right from my grade 9 general French. So it may be like Google Translate. Who knows? But if it had the right shapes of sound.
And I think Bowen's a French speaker. So I think at least Bowen was probably speaking good real French.
Oh, okay.
I think he is. Yeah.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Well, Matt and I have failed our Canadian tests here. For those listening from other places in the world, Canadians are not truly bilingual, even though our country is. But I digress. Let's start at the start and speaking of Canadians, we're going to talk about the original SNL band, and it's not band leader, but it's musical director, and that is Howard Shore, who is immensely talented. He played the alto sax in the band, and he, like I said, was the band leader. But he was, before he came to SNL, he worked with Lorne Michaels and Hart Pomerantz on the Lorne and Hart Terrific Hour. And when Lorne got SNL, it seemed like a slam dunk for him to come south and work with Saturday Night Live. To me, his most defining moment in the role is that he wrote the closing. He wrote Waltz in D, is it D minor? Waltz in A, written by founding member Howard Shore. And that is something, maybe the only thing other than Update that is like lasted the duration of the show. I'm not as versed in the 80s. I don't know if they ended in Waltz in A, but definitely all the Lorne Michaels era, it ends with that. And it's always very exciting when you get to hear the bulk of it and you get to see the credits roll and you get to see them mingling on the stage. Oftentimes here in Canada, when it aired on global TV, they would cut it off and you wouldn't see much of anything. But now, for some reason, you get to see it all. Do you guys have any feelings about that original music director and that original band? I'm going to get into more detail in a moment, but I'm just curious if you guys have any sort of thoughts or feelings.
We talked a little bit about this concept in the Don Pardo episode from last season, Matt and I, but it's just branding. And you touched on it, JD, like the Waltz in A and all of that, like the SNL band, even with them playing in between sketches and bumpers and stuff, like it all goes toward the branding of the show, like the show's identity. And when talking about Howard Shore, the fact that he created such an iconic piece of music that has obviously stood the test of time, like how much aside, unless you're one of the more famous cast members or Lorne Michaels himself, it's hard to find somebody who's had such an imprint as far as the identity and branding of the show. So right away, like he's an icon just because of that, along with the other like founding members of the SNL band. But Howard Shore will highlight at this moment as like the leader. So that's what sticks out to me about Howard Shore, specifically like his contribution to SNL.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, for me, I feel he's one of those like instrumental components, creating the feeling. Thomas was saying, because that early band was much more involved in the day-to-day operations than
they were
the later bands, because they would play as part of the show. You don't get that anymore. In those early first few seasons, they would do extended musical numbers, or like there's this one sketch with Lily Tomlin where the entire band are dressed up as nurses.
That's right.
And they do St. James Infirmary blues, and it's just like they're a component of those early days, setting the tone, part of the vibe of the entire thing. And I think it's in no small part due to the camaraderie that Shore had with the rest of the rest of the cast.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're going to mention this, JD, but also like the I'm a King Bee.
Yes, I was just going to go there. That's so funny.
Well, I'm a king, babe. I want you to be my queen. Yeah. I'm a king, babe, baby. Want you to be my queen. Well, together we can make honey, baby. The world has never seen. Okay, let's buzz a while.
To Matt's point, they were much more a part of the show. You have the nurse band, you have the beekeeper outfit. Not to mention the fact that the band is responsible for, creating interstitial music for sketches and even main music for sketches in some cases. So I think that is woven into the fabric of the blueprint or the DNA of SNL at this point. Even though, more contemporary SNL bands aren't as involved. Now, I say that having just come off the Kristen Wiig episode where we got a really funny joke from Lenny Pickett. And that was just fantastic. To steal a page from Matt's book and just offer you a little trivia, I thought it was very interesting that Howard Shore gave the name Blues Brothers to Aykroyd and Belushi. He was the one who came up with that term. And obviously we know how successful the Blues Brothers were both on the show and in their feature debut. Really good stuff. Shore moved on from SNL and had a phenomenal career post SNL, scoring films. And he scored films all through the 80s. There are some pseudo-notable ones that I don't have written down right now. But in the early 2000s and late 90s, I think is Lord of the Rings late 90s?
Yeah.
Or is it early 2000s?
The first one was early 2000s.
Early 2000s,
yeah. So
okay.
it entered production like in late 90s.
Sure. So he did the score for all three of those movies and the 3 Hobbit films. And to me, that is just phenomenal. He's won 3 Academy Awards. He's been nominated for Golden Globe Awards. He has won some Emmy Awards as well. And, he's just all over the place in terms of success. He's been pursuing music since he was basically 8 or 9 years old. At 13 and 14, he became good friends with the young Lorne Michaels in summer camp. And obviously we know what happened from there. Gosh, if I could have been in summer camp with Lorne Michaels, if only, maybe I'd have a different career right now. But I digress. Any other thoughts on Howard Shore and his influence and importance in the legacy of SNL?
Yeah, I think Howard Shore, and not just him. So I'm looking at like the members of the founding band. A lot of them were in the Blues Brothers. So a lot of them played in the Blues Brothers and like world-class musicians. You had Paul Schaefer, big time, involved. And of course, we know Paul Schaefer went on to he was a credited cast member, Paul Schaefer, at one point. Tom Bones Malone is a really well-respected trombone and trumpet player in the music world. So you have all these world-class musicians, Cheryl Hardwick on keyboards, all these people super well-respected. And Howard Shore is like the leader of this group. But these musicians, and this is going to be a theme throughout our conversation, are just world-class musicians.
Do you two know if Shore was responsible for I'm guessing he was, but for putting the band actually together?
Yeah, I would imagine so, because that's how it works now. I was reading an interview, Maddie Rice, the guitarist, and she was talking about how Lenny did the audition. It was kind of sort of like their version of the Lorne Michaels, the musician's version of the Lorne Michaels audition, where he just sort of sits there dead-faced kind of thing. But yeah, so I would assume he's just going around and getting the best of these musicians that at that point, it's a regular gig, good money, so for the 70s, that's a nice enticement to a lot of musicians, I'm sure.
You're in New York.
You're in New York, yeah.
So you have ample opportunity to go to a live venue and play, during the week if you're not rehearsing. Almost like the stand-ups and the sketch artists on SNL. Very similar through line there. That's interesting, Matt. Yeah. Well, shall we move forward? Shore was there, I guess, from the inception through 1979. So he left when everybody else left, including Lorne Michaels. There were 2 band leaders in the early 80s. One that only lasted a year, I want to say.
Yeah.
And one that was 3 or 4 years on top of that. And then Lorne came back.
So Kenny Vance succeeded Howard Shore as the musical director. But Kenny Vance, you're right, he was only there basically probably just when Gene Dumanian was there as the producer. So I think maybe when Dick Ebersol came, some of the retooling that they did, I imagine affected Kenny Vance as well as musical director. But then they replaced him with the aforementioned Tom Bones Malone, who was in the original SNL band that Howard Shore was musical director of. So Tom Bones Malone from 81 to 85 was the musical director. And I don't have much on Tom Bones Malone. I just know you always hear that name as far as when they talk about great respected musicians. The name Tom Bones Malone is one that I remember people always talking about. But so it was Kenny Vance from 80 to 81 and Tom Malone from 81 to 85.
I don't know much about that period. I just know Tom Bones Malone. If he got Bones as a nickname, you can't. No, it's Tom Bones Malone. He's like, and it speaks to the quality of those original musicians. He played multiple instruments aside from trombone. He played saxophone, trumpet, tuba, flute, and bass guitar.
Oh,
like
wow.
He could be half the band if needed. and I mean that was all these musicians were these multi-instrumentalist talent powerhouses. So yeah, it's amazing. Again, like I think that period is sort of like a weird dark period in a lot of ways where a lot doesn't make it out, kind of like a black hole of Saturday Night Live. But
it is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It's tougher to find information on that era. So that brings us to a member. I want to say he was a member of Tom Bones Malone, his troupe. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but he became band leader, and that is G.E. Smith. And we're going to pass the torch to Thomas on this one.
Yeah, so they were doing retooling. So Dick Ebersol left, and so Lorne Michaels came back to the show in 1985. So they're doing a lot of retooling. That was the year, the Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Michael Hall. We saw Lovitz and Nora Dunn and Dennis Miller come into this season, but just a lot of reshuffling and new energy into the show. So that's the season that G.E. Smith started as the musical director of the Saturday Night Live band. I don't know, Jamie, that he was in previous iterations. I think he's a Lorne guy.
Okay.
And he knows Lorne because G.E. Smith, he was married to Gilda Radner for a couple years in the early 80s. So he got to know Lorne that way. And we've seen, obviously, now that Lorne hires people who he knows and trusts. That's a big factor. So you're right. Like if I had married Gilda Radner in the early 80s, I might have a different career path as well. But as it stands, G.E. Smith's the one who married Gilda Radner. So he became SNL band leader in 1985. But G.E. Smith, if you've ever heard him speak, he has the blues in his blood. He's like a true blues man, the way he speaks and just his cadence. And you could tell he plays the blues when you listen to G.E. Smith talk. He did a really great episode, I'm going to say probably around when COVID first came up with Mark Maron. He was on WTF with Mark Maron.
Oh.
Yeah, so he and Mark Maron just geeked out about music because Mark's a guitar player. And so he and G.E. Smith just geeked out about the blues and, what about this musician? What about this guy and that guy? And so it was like two music blues geeks. Kind of. So you can tell, you can feel it in G.E. Smith's blood that he's a blues man. He started playing guitar when he was 4 years old. He started kind of learning cursory notes when he was 4. Yeah. By 7, he actually got like a friend of the family gifted him a really good, like a nice starter acoustic guitar. So G.E. Smith's been playing since he was a really tiny kid. You could tell he's just such a prodigy. That's what he was. He was a prodigy. Yeah, when he was a kid, man, he's gotten his blood. And he said something to Marin that I thought was interesting, and it says a lot about G. Smith's musical style. So he said, in talking about the Beatles and the Stones and stuff, he said he respected the Beatles, he liked the Beatles, but it was the Rolling Stones and the Kinks, he said, that really like motivated him as far as music goes. So that's just where he's coming from. Like he likes the Beatles, but he's like a Stones guy. So I think that could say a lot about a musician when they state that, like which way they lean. You know what I'm saying? He has more Stones in him. He ended up working with Mick Jagger, which was probably cool for him. But does that make sense? Like you get to kind of tell when a musician says, "I like the Beatles, but like I had like the Stones more in me."
Yeah, absolutely.
And that he mentions the Kinks too. Is like, I can add that vibes with me. I'm like, yeah, I get a Kinks energy from him.
Yeah, so this guy's just a true blue musician. He played with Hall & Oates. He was on like some of Hall & Oates' biggest records from 79 through like the mid 80s. G.E. Smith was, so that's what he was doing in the early 80s. He was mainly playing and touring with Hall & Oates. He's done albums with Tom Waits, Mick Jagger, Carly Simon, Buddy Guy, Bob Dylan, worked closely with David Bowie and Roger Waters. I mean, this guy has been around. That's what he loves. He loves playing. He's made a lot of connections, very well respected. And we talk about branding, you guys. And I know, JD, I'm pretty sure this is when you started watching, was around like the mid 80s, like maybe
That's
when
right.
Phil Hartman and Carvey and Lovitz and those guys. But G.E. Smith, to me, was part of the fabric of the show. They were even billed G.E. Smith in the Saturday Night Live band. And watching him, the dude with the blonde ponytail, just shredding on the guitar, like he was, to me as a viewer, part of like that branding. He was part of like the essence of the show. I don't know if either of you felt that way watching that era of SNL.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Like, every time they cut to commercial, you just see him wailing away on that guitar with these incredible licks. And it's just, yeah, that was just the moment. And it's like, that early G.E. Smith, Saturday Night Live band is like, at that time, I couldn't have imagined it any other way.
I can almost hear Don Pardo saying it.
G.E. Smith and the Saturday Night Live Band.
The way he said G.E. Smith, it was like, it felt like it meant something. I don't know.
Here's something nitpicky. Do we know what GE stands for?
Oh,
George Edward.
George Edward Smith.
Ah.
It's cooler.
Or
GE's
George
cooler
Edward
than George.
Haddad, actually.
Oh, wow.
What, say that again?
George Edward Haddad.
Yeah, his dad's side of the family's Lebanese.
Oh, wow.
So he grew up kind of like culturally Lebanese in a lot of ways, G.E. Smith did.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so like a real cultured guy, a lot of influences. His work, like I said, with so many people. He says, and he gives credit to a lot of people that were in his band at SNL, because he tells Marin that he just wanted to keep up with these amazing musicians. So he's like, that's just what, that's, he said, that was my role in the band. I was like the leader, but like these were world class. He's like, SNL had the budget. He said, this is a big show. They had the budget to get these amazing musicians. So he's like, I felt every week like I just had to keep up, man.
Well, he sure did.
He gives a lot of credit. He gives a lot of credit to the other people that were in the SNL band at the same time. And I'm looking, and it was guys like George Young. I know he's a pretty respected player. Earl Gardner, who was there forever. He started with G.E. Smith. All these really great musicians. Matt Chamberlain.
That blew my mind when I read that.
Yeah, he was probably best known for Pearl Jam, but he's been drummer for a lot of
Soundgarden.
Soundgarden, yeah. He was from 91 to 92. He was part of G.E. Smith's band a little bit. We'd see David Johansen as Buster Poindexter make appearances every now and then in that era. So G.E. Smith really he really gives a lot of credit to other musicians, the people in his band. Even though he was the one that was billed, and people just think of G.E. Smith from that era, he really is very complimentary of all the musicians that he got to work with on SNL.
There seems to be a through line here so far that these band leaders, put together these world-class bands to play one night a week for 90 minutes.
Yeah, right. As
probably
Matt said,
the best gig going.
Yeah, what a great gig.
Yeah. Well, from G.E. Smith, we go to the longest running, the Keenan of band leaders. I don't know that anyone will surpass his record at this point, because I don't know when he's leaving even. But this brings us to Lenny Pickett and his cohort at times that I'm sure Matt is going to get into here, based on a Facebook post I read earlier today.
Yes. Well, Lenny was one of those 1985 hires. So he came in at the same time as G.E. Smith. He was co-musical director with Cheryl Hardwick, who founding band member. She was co-musical director with G.E. Smith. She was in the band until 1995 when she retired at the end of season 25. So, I mean, she was the last member of the founding band. But so you get this, I think that's why there's such a through line in the psychology of the band leaders, because you had members of that original band all through the years up until 95, like just a little over a little under a decade ago. So you've got like just the psychology, and it is a very music forward psychology you got going on. Like, he's a former member of Tower of Power, R&B funk band, amazing. He led their horn section before joining the SNL band. He's entirely self-taught. Like, this is a guy who picked up his instruments as a kid and just taught himself, except for like a brief period where he went to work with a particular musician for like a less than a year. So I don't even really count that. So he's learned everything on his own. He went to study with Bert Wilson, a jazz musician, for a short time. But he can also play clarinet, flute, as well as the alto saxophone. He's considered a virtuoso of the altissimo register. This is a technique where you can just change your position of your tongue and the shape of your throat and make your saxophone play way outside of its register. So you'll key like a B flat and you'll get a high F kind of thing, like totally outside of the range. So that's why he gets this incredible performance out of his saxophone, because he's like pushing it beyond the limits. But he's performed with the greats. He's also performed with Hall & Oates. He performed with David Bowie as well, Aaron Neville, Katy Perry, Talking Heads. He was recently a part of Love This Giant, an album by David Byrne and St. Vincent. So he played saxophone on that. So, I mean, he's still a vibrant, powerful musician. He's surrounded himself with, if we look at this, his current band, they're all veterans at this point. There's only a couple of people who are relatively new. Leon Pendarvis, keyboard since 1980. He predates the band leader. Alex Foster, 85. Steve Turre, trombone, 85. Christine Ullman, doing vocals since 91. Sean Pelton, drums since 92. Valerie Naranjo, you see like rocking out back there every episode, 95. James Genus, 2000. Ron Blake, he's on baritone sax, 2005. Tufus Zimbabwe, keyboard since 2010. And then you have Maddie Rice, the guitarist that I mentioned earlier, and Summer Camargo, who's on trumpet, both 2020 and 2022, respectively. So for the most part, these are band members who are seasoned, respected, and talented musicians. And it's like an incredible, like, I was doing a little bit of digging into their process, and I have to say, in some ways, they have it harder than the sketch comedians, because they don't generally come in during the week. They come in on Saturday. Sometimes they'll do a bit of a rehearsal on Friday if it's a complex piece, like a big piece. But they work with Elijah Brugman. He's the sketch musical director. And he will, collaborate, like Rice was talking about the Tampon Farm sketch, where it was, Kate actually laid down a guitar track, but it was, it's not professional quality because she's just a home guitar player. So she came over and played over that and sort of expanded the composition, but they did that on Thursday. So it's like she just came in, listened to the track, and just sort of noodled something over top of it. And but yeah, like they will come in, they'll start rehearsal on Saturday, and then be ready for dress. So it's just like there's no time there, and like those sketches are so tight. Like you look at the sketches just this past weekend, you had multiple sketches where you've got this intense musical number, or some of the classic sketches where you've got music featured very prominently. Mm-hmm. And to know they've had a day to figure that out is like, this is why you have the best of the best on that band.
Yeah, I noticed SNL, especially this season in season 49, they like to do sketches where a character gives a dramatic monologue, and then you hear like the dramatic music playing in the background. So yeah, so a lot of I don't think a lot of people realize that in most of these sketches that require music, that's the band, that's like the house band playing in a lot of these sketches. So it's not just like, oh, we're gonna play in between commercials, or we're gonna play the good nights, or whatever. Like they're like involved in sketches. I think that's a really good thing to bring up.
Pros. They are absolutely pros, and very well deserving of this prestigious award, the Don Pardo Award, that we will be presenting every season. So far, the list is short. It's Don Pardo and the SNL Band. Any final thoughts on the SNL Band, gentlemen?
I'm curious, who do you think might be good for when Lenny retires to take over the reins?
This is almost harder than who replaces Lorne, because with Lorne it's a short list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like we could, if I knew anything about, jazz music in New York, and R&B music in New York, I would have a couple names for you, but I don't. So I don't even have any names. Thomas?
I wonder if SNL would do something like wanna pry like John Baptiste or something from his Stephen Colbert gig.
Well,
oh wow.
So here's the thing: Maddie was in that band.
Yeah.
Maddie came from that band. I kind of feel that she's being lined up because she's featured more and more prominently in the transitions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a multi-instrumentalist. She's young, so she's sort of got the vibe for the modern sound, but also jazz musician and guitarist. So she has that respect for the old ways as well as the new ways. I think she'd be a good fit to sort of transition a new era, because I doubt Lenny would leave before season 50.
Yeah.
But, like if there was a new guard, let's say, were to take over, I think that would be a good fit, because it's a legacy kind of trend.
How old is Pickett?
31.
He was born at 31?
Lenny
Pickett.
Lenny is he was born in 1956.
Okay.
Lenny's turning 70 in 3 days, actually, on April 10th. So as we're recording this, Lenny's going to he's 70 when this.
Yeah, born April 10th, 1954. Sorry,
yeah.
not 19.
So he might be, yeah, no, I think Matt brings up a good point about Maddie Rice, though. Maddie's 30, 31. She could be next in line to follow, to succeed Lenny Pickett, for sure. She did a good interview with Vulture earlier this year. That was the interview that I think Matt was referencing.
Yeah.
Was her Vulture interview. So, yeah, she used to play in John Baptiste's Stay Human house band for Stephen Colbert. My wife and I, a few years ago, went and saw a taping of Stephen Colbert. Dana Carvey was on that. So that was like, as an SNL fan, that was pretty special. But so I got to see Maddie and John Baptiste and do their thing. It's interesting about Maddie Rice is, and it's kind of unfortunate too, but she was almost at the center of a really, really unfortunate, nonsensical discussion online. Imagine that, a nonsensical discussion online. But people were focusing in on if she laughed or not during the monologue and her reactions during the monologue. And I think she even came out and said, I've seen a lot of these jokes in this monologue. Like, this is probably the third or fourth time that I've seen it. So she said she doesn't want to like do fake laughter. So she's like, these are just kind of it's not, no offense against the host or whoever's doing the monologue, but it's just, so it was just very weird. Like, focusing in on Maddie Rice's reaction.
And to be fair to her, most of the other band are pretty deadpan during that too, because they don't want to they don't want to telegraph stuff.
Yeah.
They don't want to,
right. And JD, so you said you had alluded to Lenny Pickett in the Kristen Wiig episode, right? So what, you want to refresh people's memories about that?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Kristen came up for her monologue, and before she monologued, she said, you know what? I haven't talked to the band in a while.
Toughest on keys, how you doing? Great. Sean on drums, how about you? Lenny on sax, how you doing?
I'm okay.
And it was something that we just have not seen before on the show in that manner. So it was really, for a show that is 49 years old, to do something it hasn't done before is pretty incredible. And I think that's why we pointed it out to each other earlier today, because it does seem sort of shocking in a sense. But it just goes to show you how important this group of people truly are, that they can, take us to a commercial break. Oftentimes when there's not enough time for another sketch, we get a commercial break, and then we come back to an interstitial and then another commercial break before we go to Waltz and A. So that is this year's Don Pardo Award winner. We have some exciting news as well. As you're listening to this, we are opening voting today, and voting will run through the 17th of May, at which time we will do some tabulation, and then we will present with you the Monday episode that will reveal Season 5's SNL Hall of Fame. Gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. For Matt Ardill and Thomas Senna, I'm JD. Do me a favor on your way out as you pass the Weekend Update exhibit. Turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.